Man, another project already. I haven't even finished this one yet. Be grateful you have work. Multitasking is what professionals do. Anyway, take care. The section chief said that and walked away from my desk. My name is Ryan. I'm a software engineer, in my 3rd year with the company. This job rarely lets me leave at the regular time. No matter how quickly I wrap things up, new tasks keep coming in. The main issue is our manager. He always agrees to take on everything, which is troublesome. Plus, he doesn't really keep track of our engineers' schedules or progress. So, the amount of work I have to complete in a day is just insane. The only time I remember leaving on time since I joined was that particular day. A couple of years ago, I got lucky. The manager was away on a business trip. I decided to go hang out with some of my coworkers. Our first stop was at the bowling alley. There, we met some ladies playing in the next lane, hit it off, and decided to go to a bar together. That's where I met my future wife, Emily. Emily and I got married about a year after we met. My job was as hectic as ever, and I was constantly working overtime. But on weekends, Emily and I would go out for movies, dinner, and enjoy shopping at the mall. Lately, Emily had been experiencing a lot of lower back and abdominal pain. She tried massages, chiropractic treatments, and osteopathic care, but nothing seemed to work. One night, she had not just her usual back pain, but also severe abdominal pain. I found her condition alarming and called an ambulance. We ended up in the ER in the middle of the night. I thought it might be appendicitis, but I was way off the mark. Though the ER doctor was an internal medicine specialist, he looked quite concerned and said, "Emily, you should see a gynecologist immediately." A gynecological issue. She's been wanting kids. Is she going to be okay? Worries flooded my mind. All I wished was for Emily to recover. The next day, I took a day off and accompanied her to a renowned hospital's gynecology department. It turned out Emily had uterine cancer. It had advanced and even spread to her colon. I blamed myself. She started showing symptoms of back pain about 6 months ago. Why didn't I take her to the hospital sooner? If it had been detected earlier, she might have had a chance with surgery. She was given just 3 months to live. I immediately discussed this with my supervisor and department head. All I wanted was to leave work on time as much as possible. I even went to my team and asked for their understanding and cooperation. My colleagues were very supportive. The following 3 months until Emily's departure went by in a flash. Honestly, I felt numb, like it wasn't real. I couldn't even look back at our past. After her funeral, I didn't feel like doing anything or even going outside. I didn't want to go back to work. But considering my colleagues who supported me, I felt obligated to return. So, I resumed work after 2 weeks. After lunch, I was called into the conference room. Both the department head and manager were there, looking grim. "Ryan, we understand you had a tough time at home, but look, our work situation is also very challenging. Leaving on time for 3 months and then taking 2 weeks off, that's not acceptable," the section chief said, with a tone dripping in sarcasm. Yes, I apologized to everyone in the department for any inconvenience. Although, deep down, I thought I hadn't really inconvenienced the director, who wasn't involved with the computer program at all. Next, the manager chimed in. "You don't want to be in a busy department, do you? We happen to have an opening in our office out in Iowa. You'll start there next week." He remembered hearing from a colleague, probably Mike, that if you took consecutive days off or refused overtime several times, you could be sent to a less desirable position. With Emily gone and a void in my heart, I didn't care where I worked anymore. Working had become so unappealing that I simply didn't care about it anymore. feeling utterly disheartened and lacking any motivation. I was so down that I just said, "Understood," and returned to my seat. Some time later, I moved. My new location was a quiet rural town. Demoted at such a young age, huh? Getting off the train, I mumbled to myself, looking at the vast landscape. Before I knew it, a week had passed since my transfer. The new company, for better or worse, was a place where I had a lot of free time. Hardly any need for overtime. I could work at my own pace. One day, I was coding a simple program at a coffee shop for a change of pace. After a while, droplets began to fall on the table I was using. It was raining outside. For a second, I thought the roof was leaking. Looking up, I saw a soaked girl with brown hair and streaks of red and blue, kind of looked like a rebel, staring intently at my laptop. Worried about the water damaging my laptop, I began to shut it down, but the girl quickly said, "Wait. Hey mister, you work with computers, right? Can I see? I'm kinda interested." She approached me. "Well, yeah, but you should dry off first. Don't want you catching a cold," I replied and called a staff. "Excuse me, can we get her towel for this young lady here?" As she dried herself off with the towel brought over by the staff, she thanked me. "Thank you, sir, for the towel." She might look like a handful, but she had manners. I was pleasantly surprised. They continued chatting over warm coffee. The girl, named Catherine, was a senior at a nearby public high school. She had just started her senior year and was unsure about her future. "I'm not really academic, you know, so college isn't in the cards, but I want to pick the right job," Catherine shared. She had tried various part-time jobs, like working in a factory, being a cashier at a grocery store, and even fast food. But nothing felt right. Then I thought, everything's about computers nowadays. She didn't own a computer, but got interested after some lessons at school. If she wanted more options for jobs, knowing computers would be essential. I told Catherine, "I'll be working at the coffee shop for the rest of the week, so if you need anything, feel free to drop by." The next day and the day after that, she came to the coffee shop. When she asked my name and I told her, she began calling me Mr. Smith. "What's all that stuff you're always doing on your computer, Mr. Smith? All those letters and stuff. It looks like some kind of spell." "Oh, this, it's called programming. It's used to make websites and blogs." After explaining how websites are made by combining various characters and symbols, she became very interested. "Do you have a computer at home?" I asked, to which she replied she didn't. Eager to learn, Catherine began to copy the contents of my screen onto her notebook, diligently, day after day. After about a month of this, I made a proposal. "You'll learn faster if you actually use a computer, rather than just copying things down. We've got an old laptop at the office we were gonna toss out. Want to use it for studying?" Her eyes lighting up, Catherine exclaimed, "Really, Mr. Smith? I can have it." "Yeah, it's old and not the best, but better than nothing," I explained. "That's fine. Just having one is great." A few days later, when I gave Catherine the computer, she jumped up and down and said yay. From the next day, she came armed with a barrage of questions. She was diligent, buying books to study from, and bringing a notebook filled with questions to go through. Thanks to that, she was able to launch a small website just 6 months later. "Hey, I can use this as a reference for job hunting," she said with a gleaming smile, obviously delighted. With job interviews just days away, Catherine dyed her hair jet black. "Catherine, you look so professional. Just for now. Once I secure a job, I'll go back to being stylish," she said with a bashful smile, slightly pouting. "Good luck with your interviews." "Thanks," Catherine replied, flashing a peace sign with a big grin. 2 weeks later, while I was at our usual coffee shop, Catherine burst in excitedly. Ryan, guess what? I got a job offer." She reported the news with a radiant smile, as if a flower had blossomed on her face. I replied, "That's great. Congratulations." To my surprise, Catherine started crying, still wearing that big smile. "Ryan, thank you. Getting into my first choice company is all thanks to you. I really appreciate it." Seeing her like this made me happy. To me, Catherine always seemed a bit quirky, but I found her irresistibly charming. Ever since Emily left, there had been a gaping hole in my life, but Catherine slowly started filling it. Soon, I realized I spent more time helping Catherine study than dwelling on memories of Emily. "No, Catherine, I'm the one who should be thanking you. Do you want to go out for dinner next Sunday to celebrate?" She cheerfully replied, "Sounds great." And just like that, it was April. "Good morning." A person from HR greeted everyone as the morning meeting began. "Today, we'll introduce the new employees who will join us this year. All right, all of you, please come forward." The personnel at the back were beckoned to step up in front. What? Upon seeing the 3 new recruits, I almost dropped the documents I was holding. Among the new hires, there were 2 men and 1 woman. The sole female employee was Catherine. As Catherine caught my gaze, she discreetly flashed a peace sign with her right hand. Indeed, Catherine had joined the IT department I was a part of. "Good morning. You surprised me. I thought you'd start at the company where you got your job offer. I was planning to ask you how you were doing once you settled in. I was worried," I told her. She giggled. "Haha, be prepared to work hard, okay? Please go easy on me." Catherine stuck her tongue out playfully and smiled. Every time I saw that smile, it warmed my heart. Asked if I had romantic feelings for Catherine, who was 7 years younger, I'd honestly be unsure. But one thing's certain, she's a special presence in my life. On the morning of the new fiscal year, seeing Catherine's face was a surprise, but it gave me a new goal: to nurture this adorable girl into a full-fledged programmer. I felt that my life, which had been just a daily routine of doing the work in front of me, was now filled with a sense of purpose. When I got home that night, I looked at a picture of my wife and talked to her. "Ever since you left, I've been like an empty shell. You must have been worried about me." But after coming to this countryside town and meeting Catherine, teaching her about computers almost daily, I've been distracted from my sorrow. I wonder if you're jealous, watching over me and Catherine. I'll do my best to be a reliable senior, so please watch over me. I will walk firmly forward so that you can rest assured. With that, I silently made a promise to Emily. In the photograph, Emily seemed to smile gently at me, as if saying, "That's right, I'm cheering for you." That's the feeling I got. Good morning. Early in the morning, after returning from my daily jog, an unfamiliar woman greeted me. In the morning sunlight, she stood smiling, a tall woman with long black hair and distinctive elongated yet round eyes, somewhat like a cat's, making her look like a model. "Excuse me." Surprised to be greeted by such a beauty so early in the morning, I looked around, wondering if she was really addressing me, and started acting a bit suspicious. Seeing this, she gave a slight laugh. "I'm Sandy Miller. I moved in next door yesterday. Sorry for the late introduction. Nice to meet you." Her high-pitched voice was as clear as a bell when she said this. Then she gave a slight bow in my direction. In that moment, a sweet and refreshing scent tickled my nose. It must be her perfume. "Oh, I'm Jake Smith. I teach part-time at that all-girls school you can see over there." Not knowing what else to say, I blurted out a brief introduction. Sandy looked in the direction I pointed. "Oh, the one with the church," she murmured. "I work at a Catholic all-girls high school, which, although small, has a wonderful stained glass church. You can slightly see its roof from this apartment." "You're a teacher. That's surprising. You don't look like one at all," she said with a mischievous grin. I could only scratch my head in response. I've always been told at school that I don't quite seem like a teacher, and people I meet for the first time apparently can't imagine me in that role. Maybe I lack a bit of authority, I said, half jokingly. She narrowed her eyes playfully. Please, call me Sandy, Mr. Teacher. Her voice was now much deeper than the high-pitched tone from earlier, which caught me off guard. Whether she realized the effect she had on me or not, Sandy waved, saying "see you later," and disappeared into her apartment. The whole exchange must have lasted just about 3 minutes. Yet, in that short time, Sandy left a strong impression on me. I had thought that all girls' schools would be lively, but when I first started at this school, I was surprised by its tranquility. Having transferred from a technical school, that might have made me feel even more so. The students are all modest and well-mannered, many of them giving off a somewhat sheltered vibe. And they always greet with "good day." I remember being flustered the first time I was greeted that way, not knowing how to respond. There are no troublemakers, and life at the school is peaceful, without much excitement. Today, as always, when the students pass me in the hallway, they stop and give a gentle bow, saying "good day." I simply reply with a yeah or a ha. That's the best I can muster. I also bump into nuns wearing scapulas among the students. There are older nuns as well as younger ones. Some nuns teach, while others participate only in charity activities. I've also heard that some are devoted to continuous prayers in the church. Either way, I spend most of my day in this surreal environment. "Good morning, Mr. Smith." The one who greeted me in the hallway was one of the nuns, Sister Susan. She's still young, and the students told me she chose the path of a nun right after high school graduation. Many students look up to her kind nature. At school, she's like a big sister to the students, listening to their concerns in the infirmary. "Sister Susan, you're working today." I know she's younger than me, but whenever I talk to her, I can't help but use formal language. "Hey, you're using formal language again. I'm much younger, so you don't have to be so polite," she said with a gentle laugh, making me scratch my head in embarrassment. Recently, have there been any serious concerns from the students? I've been wondering about that since summer break is just around the corner. As summer approaches, even the more reserved students seem to get a bit more excited. Maybe they're excited to break free from this otherworldly school for the summer break. "I wanted to discuss something with you, Mr. Smith." In the bustling hallway, Sister Susan whispered to me. We agreed to meet after school in the infirmary, and with that, we went our separate ways. After school, when I arrived at the infirmary, Sister Susan served me some tea. "Thank you." So, about that student. I took a sip of the tea and got straight to the point. I didn't want to take up too much of Sister Susan's time. I had intended to make this conversation brief. "Well, it's actually about Catherine from Class A." Sister Susan began with that introduction. Catherine from Class A is a standout student in this school. It's not that she causes problems, but compared to other students who seem somewhat aloof, Catherine seems to have an abundance of energy and liveliness. From my perspective, she's just like any other high school girl out there. Catherine, is she going through some issues? I couldn't imagine the ever-cheerful Catherine having concerns serious enough for her to consult Sister Susan. It must be quite a dilemma, I thought. Actually, she's seeking advice about love. Blushing slightly, Sister Susan said with a hint of embarrassment. She added in a soft voice, "I have no experience in that area." Relationship advice. Typical concern for a teenage high school girl. However, it seems to be a challenging topic for Sister Susan. Apparently, Catherine has been deeply infatuated, and if her love doesn't reciprocate, she seriously mentioned becoming a nun. Prayer isn't meant for that. I was taken aback and flinched when she suddenly raised her voice. Based on what I've heard from Catherine, I think it might be best to speak with her guardian. Hearing such words coming out of the usually sensible Sister Susan surprised me. Would that be in Catherine's best interest? Finding out something they didn't want their guardian to know can be distressing for a student. I tried to gently rein her in, but she seemed not to hear me. They live nearby, so I thought of just meeting them. I wanted you to accompany me. The conversation was already moving towards meeting Catherine's guardian, and I was getting anxious. She must be genuinely concerned about Catherine to be taking such actions. I racked my brain, trying to find a way to calm the situation without offending Sister Susan. Okay, I'll meet them first. I'll try to subtly ask about Catherine's situation. This was the only way to stop Sister Susan's impulsiveness. To calm the situation, I found myself making that promise without thinking. I can't believe I'm taking up so much of your time, Mr. Smith. No worries, let me handle it. I'll make sure to report to you about it tomorrow. Looking into Sister Susan's eyes, I tried to put on the most serious face I could muster. She stared right back with a steady gaze. I felt a twinge of guilt, feeling like I might be deceiving her, but it was for both Sister Susan and Catherine's sake. I silently said a little prayer in my heart, whispering I'm sorry. Though I had let it slip in the heat of the moment, having promised to report the matter to Sister Susan, I decided to go meet Catherine's guardian. If they weren't around when I visited, that would be just fine, and if they were, I thought I'd just have a little chat and then head on home. Coincidentally, Catherine hadn't yet submitted her college application. The deadline had passed 3 days ago. As Catherine's assistant teacher, I figured I'd be fine as long as I had a reason to visit. Without giving it much thought, I checked Catherine's guardian's address. When I saw the address, I couldn't believe my eyes. The previous address was crossed out with a double line, and a new one was freshly written. And, to my surprise, it was the apartment right next to mine. Turns out, my new neighbor is Catherine's guardian. Looking closer, it seemed the guardian's name had been recently changed. I recalled hearing that Catherine had grown up in a complicated household. I thought it might be all right to just introduce myself as her assistant teacher and say hello. I felt a bit more at ease. When I rang the doorbell of the apartment next door, I wasn't very nervous. The door clicked open, and Sandy peeked out. "Hi, it's Jake Smith from next door." I had planned what to say, but the moment I saw Sandy's face, I got nervous and forgot. I think I was obviously acting suspicious. I just had a little something to ask. My tone sounded like a police interrogation. I noticed Sandy looking at me with an amused expression. Seeing her reaction, I regained a bit of composure. "Sandy, are you Catherine's guardian by any chance?" As I stammered out the explanation, she nodded slowly. "My family's a bit complicated. All my siblings have different mothers. Of course, the mothers of Catherine's and mine are not the same, but neither of them wanted to have Catherine, so I became her guardian." Sandy said that in one breath and then looked at me with a challenging gaze. I could sense her determination, wanting to be taken seriously as a young guardian. It's not about the qualifications as a guardian, but Catherine hasn't submitted her college application form yet. I quickly blurted out the excuse I had prepared. Sandy then said, and scratched her head, looking relieved. "I've told her she should go to any college she wants, but she seems hesitant." She seemed to know about the missing college application form. Then, adding, "We shouldn't be talking here," Sandy invited me inside. Her room was, well, quite sparse. She might be a minimalist. However, there were several piles of thick books. I had assumed she was a student, but apparently not. "Here you go." She handed me a glass of iced tea, which I gratefully accepted. I sat on a cushion, while she settled into a computer chair. "Any other issues regarding Catherine?" As I took a sip of my tea, Sandy spoke up. Caught off guard, I struggled to respond. Visiting a guardian's home just for college guidance. I've never heard of that. Did something happen to Catherine? As she stared intently at me, I felt like a deer caught in headlights. There was no hiding anything. I gave up and decided to be honest with Sandy about what I had heard from Sister Susan. Of course, I emphasized that I wanted it kept a secret from Catherine. Sandy listened quietly, only nodding occasionally to encourage me to continue. She had a certain presence and authority about her, making it hard to tell who was the older one here. According to Sister Susan, Catherine expressed her intention to live with a certain young man right after graduation. She wanted to start living together as soon as they left home, but with college on the horizon, that seemed challenging. Why? Because that young man is a junior in high school, a year younger than Catherine. Catherine told Sister Susan that she was prepared to support him financially. Really? Catherine said that. After hearing the entire story, Sandy paused, eyes cast downward in deep thought. It seemed like she knew the guy Catherine had feelings for and looked troubled by the situation. I truly wish for my students to follow their own paths in life, but right now, she seems like a ticking time bomb. I wouldn't be surprised if she ran away from home. I honestly expressed what I had felt when I talked to Sister Susan. I couldn't tell Sister Susan, as it might have caused an uproar, but I do believe this situation carries that kind of risk. Thank you for discussing this with me. I'm grateful to have gotten to know a bit about Catherine's feelings. Could you leave this matter to me for now? Sandy stood up from her computer chair, deeply bowing her head towards me. A gentle scent of shampoo filled the air. Of course, you're Catherine's guardian after all, but if there's anything I can help with, please don't hesitate to ask. I quickly said, please, lift your head, upon which Sandy looked up with a playful grin. She seemed to have so many expressions. The face she had when we met this morning was like a different person's, and her current smile resembled that of a young girl receiving praise. I wonder how many sides there are to her. My interest in Sandy grew stronger. A week had passed since I discussed Catherine's case with Sandy. I told Sister Susan that I had already spoken with Catherine's guardian and asked her to keep an eye on the situation. As for Catherine herself, she hasn't handed in her college application yet. Her homeroom teacher, aware of her complicated family situation, is willing to wait a bit past the deadline. When I got back to my apartment after work, I noticed the window of Sandy's room next door was slightly open. Did she forget to close it, or was she letting in some air because it was hot? Seems a bit careless, I thought. I should subtly remind her the next time we meet. As I was thinking this, a gust of wind briefly lifted her curtains. For a split second, I could see inside. In the dimly lit room of the early evening, I could see Sandy trying to change into a t-shirt. A faint silhouette of her pale back stood out against the dim backdrop. I knew I shouldn't watch, but the contrast between the shadows and her skin was mesmerizing. As she twisted slightly, I saw a dark scar, like that of a severe burn, stretching from her side to below her chest. A keloid that extends from the side of the abdomen to just below the chest. It's the scar of a major burn. Given its size, it must have been a life-threatening injury. I gasped and stepped back from the scene. I shouldn't have looked. I saw her secret. I quickly tried to open my door. In my haste, I fumbled with the key, making a clattering noise. Just as I managed to open the door of the room next to mine clicked open. "Jake, do you have a moment?" Sandy peeked her head through the open door. Remembering what I had just seen, I felt my face flush and I was at a loss for how to hide my shock. Seeing my awkwardness, she tilted her head with a puzzled look. "If you're busy, maybe some other time." As Sandy started to close the door, I hurriedly stopped her. Just like the other day, I went into her room and sat on a cushion on the floor. I noticed a few more items in her room than before, which made me a bit uneasy. There were more feminine items. A pink makeup bag and cute socks. While these could belong to Sandy, they somehow didn't seem to fit her. It's about Catherine. I heard she hasn't submitted her college application yet. Sandy sat on her computer chair, looking out the window as she began to speak. Whenever she talked about something important, she had a habit of looking away. That's right, she hasn't submitted her application yet. I answered honestly, as there was no need to hide anything. After hearing my response, Sandy sighed softly and said, I see. In fact, Catherine approached me saying she wants to work right after graduating high school. Sandy sighed again. Apparently, Catherine tearfully confided in Sandy, her guardian, about her desire to stand on her own 2 feet as soon as possible. She was crying, but I think it was because she felt helpless about having to give up on her dreams. It wasn't like she was crying just to get sympathy. Sandy emphasized that. I remembered Catherine talking about wanting to be a lawyer in the future when she was a freshman. She took law courses, wanting to help kids in trouble. Remembering that, I got a faint idea of what the issue might be. It's about the boy Catherine's seeing. I think it's probably my brother, Jason. Catherine wants to move out and live with Jason. That's her wish. Sandy made a slightly troubled face, then chuckled. She seemed to be recalling something, her smile tinged with a hint of sadness. Then, prefacing with "This is just between us," she started to talk about her family. It seems there are 7 siblings in total, all with different mothers. Including Sandy, only 3 of them are adults. The remaining 4 are still students. Sandy never lived with her father, she lived with her mother. In other words, she seems to be a child born out of wedlock. Catherine had a similar situation, but she was taken in by her father, while her younger brother was raised by Sandy's mother. It's said that Sandy and Catherine's brother grew up like true siblings. What only Catherine was taken in by him, I won't know unless I ask that man. The fact is, Catherine and Jason are blood-related siblings, yet they grew up apart. Recently, Catherine, who learned that Jason was a real brother, lashed out at their father for not taking him in. The father apparently snapped back, saying, "After all I did for you." He then cut off all financial support. Hearing this, Sandy, acting as the new guardian, started looking after Catherine's living expenses. My mother was a bit fragile mentally, and she did some things she regrets to Jason. She probably broke down waiting for that man who never came around. One day, with a kettle full of boiling water in her hands, Sandy's mother approached the 2 of them. A harrowing incident took place. Protecting her brother, Sandy suffered severe burns. How could she? Why would she do such a thing? I couldn't help but mutter those words. Sandy grinned and explained. My mom thought that if her son got seriously injured, he would come to see her. I got chills hearing Sandy's words. I never imagined that such a passionate feeling could exist in this world. Just thinking that I have the blood of such a woman gives me the creeps. Sandy smiled beautifully, as if reading my thoughts. Her intensity might be that unique aura possessed by those who have been through some real ordeals. Jake, can you please help guide Catherine? Sandy bowed deeply to me. Then, the front doorbell rang, and the door swung open. Sandy, I'm home. The one entering with a cheerful voice, calling out Sandy's name, was none other than Catherine. What, Mr. Smith, how do you do, I guess? Naturally, upon seeing me, Catherine exclaimed in surprise and acted a bit awkward. I didn't expect to be seen by Catherine either, so I was lost for words. Mr. Smith is here because he's concerned about your future and came to discuss it with me, your guardian. Sandy informed Catherine. Catherine responded with a somewhat suspicious "Is that so? I heard you wanted to go to law school. If you're undecided about which one, I can help." I addressed Catherine, who was standing. Her expression clouded slightly. I'm sorry, I'll be honest. I've heard about your family situation from Sandy. I understand you want to live with your brother. Sandy, apparently not expecting me to bring it up directly, exclaimed, "Wait, Mr. Smith." I decided at that moment that I wanted to face Catherine sincerely, without any lies. You sure have the audacity to barge in like that. Do teachers think they are so superior? Catherine said sarcastically, her lips curling in disdain as she slammed her belongings on the floor in frustration. Just because you've heard a thing or two doesn't mean you get to dictate what I do. Can you even imagine the life me and my brother have lived? I was anxious, fearing that Catherine might start crying. However, her eyes didn't reveal any tears. All I could see was the bubbling rage. It wasn't anger directed at me. It was anger directed at something much bigger. Anger towards her parents, towards adults, the system, the world at large. It felt as if all these emotions were packed inside her. I need to grow up fast. I have to. At Catherine's words, Sandy clasped her head in her hands. Perhaps Sandy once felt the same way. That's not the point. Your current environment might be putting pressure on you, but there are people who genuinely care about you, like me, trying to help. You are protected, Catherine. You don't need to rush. I knew my words sounded cliché, but that's all I could come up with to convey my feelings to Catherine. Did you ask Sandy about her burn, Mr. Smith? Yes, Sandy told me. She has a severe burn scar from her side to below her chest. Upon hearing my words, Catherine quickly turned to look at Sandy. Sandy returned the look with a faint smile, her expression slightly complicated. Catherine, what Mr. Smith said is true. I'm working on getting you to live with Jason now, so believe in me. Sandy tried to comfort Catherine gently. If you study properly in college and gain some more knowledge, I believe you can help many more kids like us. We're counting on you, both Jason and I. At Sandy's words, Catherine nodded slightly. And you're sure this is okay? She asked in a trembling voice. You're worried about the tuition fees and stuff. I do have a job, you know. Upon hearing a surprised voice from Sandy, Catherine also exclaimed, "What?" It seemed that Catherine had mistakenly thought Sandy was unemployed. But you're always home, they exclaimed in surprise. Sandy's job is apparently translating philosophical books. She mostly works from home, so she seldom goes out. Jumping to conclusions as always, aren't you, Catherine? You need to be more observant. Sandy sighed in exasperation. I couldn't help but laugh out loud. It seemed that having a good conversation could bridge any gap. If you don't talk, misunderstandings don't get cleared up, and you can't convey what you feel. Sandy, I'm sorry. I promised it would be between us, but I broke that promise right away. Feeling guilty after laughing, I sincerely apologized to Sandy. She pondered for a moment, placing a finger on her chin, and then smirked. Mr. Smith, how did you know the exact location of my burn? I don't recall sharing that specific detail. Sandy's eyes sparkled mischievously as she tilted her head and asked. Well, that's... I was flustered, and Sandy grinned even wider. Catherine, her face turning beet red, covered her mouth and asked, Wait, are you too? You know, I tried to deny it, but words failed me, fearing I might dig myself deeper. You're going to take responsibility, right, Mr. Smith? With a playful smile similar to the one she had when we first met, Sandy looked deep into my eyes. I'll do my best. At my response, both Sandy and Catherine shared a laugh. And true to my word, 3 years later, I took responsibility and placed a ring on Sandy's finger. Meeting her was a stroke of fate, and I consider myself an incredibly lucky guy to have found the best partner in life. On a spring evening, cherry blossoms faintly glow in the light of the street lamps. At the welcome party for the new hires, the woman sitting next to me asked, Jason, what type of woman do you like? Her name is Lillian. She's a 22-year-old new hire. Pulling her bangs back makes her look older than her age. She's quite a beauty. I'm Jason, a 45-year-old single office worker. Far from being handsome, I have an unremarkable face, a bit of a belly, and a slightly chubby build. Lately, my hair has been thinning too. My biggest insecurity is my short height. There were no women in the company who would strike up a conversation with someone like me. So, when a young, pretty 20-something asked me about my type, I was both shocked and elated as I answered her question. I guess someone cheerful and kind. Young folks sure have a lot of energy, don't they? Nervously, I said that, and she responded with a shy smile. Are you okay with someone much younger? It was this conversation that made me start noticing her. On the way home from the welcome party, we happened to share the same train ride for part of the journey, and we chatted about various things. She mentioned that she has a thing for older men. When I talked to her, she was a very serious girl with a very solid mindset. I didn't sense any of the typical carefreeness associated with young folks in her. Perhaps because of her mature character, guys her age just didn't seem reliable or fulfilling for her. She mentioned she had many older friends. Ever since then, she and I got along well. We chatted a lot during work, and I often helped her out when she was stuck. You know, it'd be clearer if you added a graph to this document. You can quickly make one by clicking here. Got it, I'll give it a try. Oh, you've been talking for a while now. Are you thirsty? I'll get you some tea. She always approached me with a bright smile. Her smile was incredibly captivating, and I found myself growing fonder of her day by day. Then, one day, I mustered the courage to ask her out for dinner. My heart raced, wondering if she might decline, but she readily agreed. To ensure she felt at ease, I chose a chic bistro instead of a high-end restaurant. I enjoyed a beer, and she had a citrus cocktail, as we relished our meal and conversation. Despite our age difference, we hit it off. Discovering we shared similar tastes in movies, our conversation never waned, and time flew by. She looked happy and smiled throughout. As we walked toward the train station on our way home, she turned to me and said, would you be interested in dating me? Excuse me, I couldn't believe my ears. For a plain and impressive older guy like me to be confessed to by a woman, especially by someone as young and lovely as her. It felt so unreal, almost like a dream. Of course, I immediately said yes. Is this really not a dream? Making sure she couldn't see, I discreetly pinched the back of my left hand with my right. Ouch. This is definitely real. No doubt about it. For someone like me, who's never been popular with the ladies, she became my very first girlfriend. I often wondered what she saw in an average-looking guy like me. She told me it was my kind and earnest personality, and the fun times we shared together that won her heart. From that point on, every day felt as if I were in heaven, with everything shining so brightly around me. It made me believe that if you live life earnestly, even through the tough times, good things can come your way. I felt that from the bottom of my heart. Soon, a rumor spread around the office about us dating, and everyone was pretty shocked. Some labeled us Beauty and the Beast and joked about us being an odd couple behind our backs, but I never let it bother me. The guys who had a crush on Lillian were envious of me. Our relationship went smoothly, and a year later, I proposed to her. You know, even though I'm just me, I want to marry you. Yes, I'd be honored. She shed tears of joy. On our next day off, I took her to meet my parents at their house. I can't believe such a lovely young lady is going to be with our son. It brings tears to my eyes, right, honey? Oh, indeed. Thank you, Lillian. We trust you'll take good care of our son. My parents were overjoyed and warmly welcomed her. On our way back from my parents' house, Lillian and I held hands and chatted. "We need to visit your parents next, Lillian. Maybe I should wear something that makes me look a bit younger." "You're perfect just the way you are, really." Lillian looked at me and smiled brightly. However, the next day, Lillian suddenly called and dropped a bombshell. "We should break up." "What? Why? What happened all of a sudden?" I was stunned, and when I asked for a reason, she hesitantly began. "Last night, I called home and told them about our plans to get married, and well, they were against it. Especially her father," she said, "was strongly opposed to our marriage. The reason is our age difference. I guess that makes sense. It might be inevitable. There's a 23-year age gap between us. I heard that her parents are even younger than me. If my precious daughter told me she wanted to marry a man older than me, a man of uncertain character, I'd definitely be worried." She cried, saying that we can't get married if her father opposes it. "You know, that's why I think we should break up. Instead of being with someone who can't marry, you should find someone else better and get married." "No way. He'll think I can't marry Lillian. Even though I love her so much, I can't imagine marrying anyone else. I absolutely don't want to break up. I won't give up," I said to her, comforting her. "Can you at least let me meet your dad once? I want to let him know how serious I am about this. If we sit down and talk face to face, I'm sure he'll understand." "But Dad said he doesn't want to meet you, and he's a very stubborn man. Even if he did meet you, I really think he wouldn't allow our marriage." I desperately tried to persuade her. "Don't give up. You want to be with me too, right? Of course, I want to be with you more than anything, but it's impossible. I can't go against my father's wishes," Lillian said, breaking into tears again. "Lillian, please don't cry. Just let me meet him. We won't know unless we try. I promise I'll do my best to convince him. No matter how slim the chances, let's believe and give it a shot." After a while, she finally stopped crying and said, "All right, I understand." A few days later, on Sunday, we decided to visit her home during the daytime when we knew her father would be there, without giving them a heads up. When we arrived, she unlocked the front door and went inside. I followed behind her. She called out to her father, who was in the living room. "I'm home." "Lillian, what's going on?" Coming in announced like this. Lillian's surprised father turned to face her as she spoke. "Dad, I've brought someone I want you to meet." Following her, I stepped into the living room, my palms sweaty with nerves. "Hello, I'm so sorry for the sudden visit. My name is Jason, and I've been seeing Lillian." I bowed deeply to her father in respect. I then lifted my head and looked him straight in the eyes. I was prepared for him to possibly punch me. Every muscle in my body tensed up. However, looking at me, his eyes widened in surprise. Then, with a loud voice, he exclaimed towards me, "Wait, aren't you Big Jason? It's Big Jason, right?" Saying that, he stood in front of me, grabbing both of my shoulders. I stared at him in shock, examining his face closely. My mind raced. Then, memories from our younger days began to slowly resurface. That's when I noticed the scar on his forehead, and it hit me. I remembered that face. "Are you Brandon?" "Yeah, it's me. Long time no see, huh? Wow, how've you been?" We embraced tightly. Brandon was my childhood friend. He used to live in my neighborhood. Back in elementary school, Brandon was often bullied, and many of our classmates would pick on him. I always stepped in and helped him out. It was the same the first time we met. Brandon was surrounded by 4 or 5 boys, getting hit with sticks and kicked. I shouted, "Stop it," and rushed over, but they just ignored me and continued to attack Brandon. I positioned myself in front of Brandon to shield him, taking their blows myself. I fought back, swinging my fists, but I was no match for them. After they had their fill of tormenting me, they eventually stopped and left. That's when we both had big scars on our foreheads. "You okay? Does it hurt?" When I asked Brandon, he replied, "Yeah, I'm fine. Thanks for helping. But why did you defend me? You can't just leave someone in trouble, can you?" That's how I responded. It was a lesson from my dad. He always told me, if you see someone in need, help them out. It had become a part of me. That day, I took Brandon back to my home and tended his wounds. From then on, Brandon and I started hanging out together. I was the only friend Brandon had. Brandon's home was a single-parent household, and his mom was always working late, so Brandon often spent time at my house. He often had dinner at my place too. Both Brandon and I were only children, so it felt like we had got a sibling, and it made us happy. We did homework together and shared snacks. In the summer, we went to the pool, had watermelon smashing games, and set off fireworks in the yard, and in the winter, we roasted marshmallows on an open fire and built snowmen when it snowed. I made so many fun memories with Brandon. But just before I was about to start middle school, my family had to move because of my dad's job transfer. When I told Brandon about it, he cried, "If you're gone, who'll I play with? I'll be lonely." "You'll be fine, Brandon. I'm sure you'll make new friends." I patted Brandon's shoulder and said, "We'll write letters, we promised as we parted," but in the end, the correspondence faded after just a few times. Come to think of it, Brandon mentioned in a letter from a while back that he had become friends with a new kid who transferred to his school. He's probably getting along well with his new buddies. I was also busy adjusting to my new environment. We continued to exchange holiday cards for about 10 years, but eventually, even that stopped. I think the last card mentioned something about him getting married. I can't believe Lillian's dad is Brandon. What a shock. I was just as surprised. We laughed and playfully slapped each other on the shoulders. Lillian looked at us with a surprised face. "Take a seat. Let's have a drink tonight," Brandon said, gesturing for me to sit down. Lillian and I took seats across from Brandon. His wife brought out beer and glasses from the kitchen. We poured the beer into our glasses, and Brandon took the lead for a toast. "Well then, here's to celebrating my reunion with Jason, and also to Lillian and Jason's engagement." "Wait, Brandon, are you okay with this?" "Of course I am. I know exactly the kind of person you are, Jason. You might not have been the best at academics or sports, but you've always had a strong sense of justice and were sincere and kind. I can trust my daughter with someone like you. Age doesn't matter. I realize that now. I'm relieved. Thank you, Brandon." "Thanks, Dad." Lillian was also overwhelmed with joy and shed tears. That night, Brandon and I shared drinks and reminisced about the good old days. 6 months later, Lillian and I had our wedding. Of course, both our families and all our parents were in attendance, celebrating with us. Lillian looked absolutely stunning in her wedding dress. She was way out of my league. Before the wedding began, Brandon said to me, "From today, we're going to be in-laws, huh? Yeah. Nice to officially be part of the family, father-in-law." When I said that, Brandon laughed. "Drop the father-in-law stuff, will you? It's such a strange feeling, reuniting with an old friend like this, and on top of that, becoming related by marriage. And right next to me is my beloved wife." "I'm so happy," I whispered, to which Lillian replied with a bright smile. "I'm happy too." She smiled and gently touched her belly. Inside Lillian's belly, a new life is growing. I can't wait to meet this little one. I want him to be happy for sure. Yeah, let's make a happy life, the three of us. There was a time I was worried when our marriage faced opposition. Never imagined things would turn out this way. Brandon had been too hard on his daughter in the past, something he regretted. He promised me he'd learn to cut the cord since she got married. He said he felt at ease entrusting his daughter to me. Today's sky was so brilliantly blue and clear, it seemed like yesterday's rain was a mere lie. It felt as if even the heavens were celebrating our new beginning. The CEO passed away. His funeral will be done in 2 days. It was just 2 days ago that I received this shocking news. It was from my boss at the headquarters in New York, the one who had transferred me to a less desirable position. "You better be there," he emphasized. Well, of course, every employee would attend the CEO's funeral, no matter their position. But I was exasperated by my boss's typical attitude. Today, I left the suburban branch of the food distribution company I'd been transferred to and arrived at the nearest station to the funeral venue. Looks like I'll make it on time. As I was thinking that and about to pass through the station gates, I spotted a woman struggling at the ticket booth, pushing a wheelchair. The station attendant, who looked like she was about to approach, seemed somewhat reluctant. Upon closer inspection, the woman had foreign features, perhaps Vietnamese. In the wheelchair was a young girl, also with Vietnamese features, possibly in elementary school. Mother and daughter, maybe. I was curious, and as I casually approached them, I realized they were speaking in Vietnamese. Actually, I had majored in Vietnamese as my secondary language in college. Though it was just a secondary language, I had taken proper courses and even got certified. I also had experience working at a Vietnamese restaurant. Thanks to being surrounded by native speakers, my speaking skills were decent. Given my background, I decided to approach them and asked in Vietnamese, "Is everything all right?" She looked surprised for a moment but quickly responded in Vietnamese. "Oh, do you speak Vietnamese?" Relieved that she understood me, I nodded. "Yes, I learned it in college. I can speak a bit. I thought maybe I could help if you had any issues." Her eyes lit up. "Thank you so much. I wasn't sure how to buy tickets. I tried asking the station attendant, but I barely speak any English, so we couldn't communicate. I didn't know what to do. It's so good to find someone kind. Could you show me how to buy the tickets?" "Of course, let me guide you." I showed her how to purchase and load a Metro card, and we passed through the gates together. "Thank you so much. You were a great help." They both looked visibly relieved. It felt good to be able to use what I had learned to help someone. "My pleasure. There's an elevator over there." "That should make things easier," I pointed out, then noticed something. Oh no. The elevator was out of service. "Oh dear, it seems to be broken." Hearing this, she looked deeply worried. "Oh no, what do we do? We have a very important appointment today." Her cheerful expression darkened. "Should I help carry the wheelchair up the stairs?" I hesitated. Depending on the weight of the wheelchair, it might take too long. And then I might miss the CEO's funeral. I considered asking the station attendants for help, but a quick glance made it obvious they were avoiding eye contact. I didn't want to rely on them. I had to do something. I couldn't just abandon them now. I made up my mind. "Would you like me to help carry the wheelchair up the stairs? Can you carry your daughter on your back?" "Yes, I can. Thank you," she replied with joy. She took the little girl out of the wheelchair, folded it, and tried to lift it. It was pretty heavy. Was it foreign made? Or are American ones this heavy too? I haven't lifted any other wheelchairs, so I couldn't compare. Gathering strength, I somehow managed to carry it up the stairs. "Are you okay?" Even though she was also carrying her child, she kept checking on me. "I'm fine. Aren't you the one who's got the heavier load?" Trying to appear calm, I continued up the stairs. "I'm good. I'm used to carrying my daughter." As she smiled, we reached a landing halfway up the stairs and decided to take a break. "I'm sorry for asking now, but do you have time? I'm worried if you were in a hurry to." "Well, actually, I am kind of in a rush." I briefly thought of my boss, replied with a wry smile, and she looked alarmed. "Oh no, please, go on ahead without us." Even though she said that, there's no way I could leave the mother and child alone on this landing. She definitely couldn't carry the heavy wheelchair up by herself. "No worries, helping you two is more important. Please let me assist you all the way." Checking the time, it seemed I would barely make it to the funeral. After resting and regaining some strength, we continued up the remaining stairs. "You can do it, thanks, mister." The daughter cheered me on. Finally, we made it to the top. "We made it, we're here. Thank you so much for helping. We truly appreciate it." The three of us shared a moment of joy on the platform. Just then, a station announcement sounded. "The train will be departing shortly." Oh no, I instinctively started to run, but the train doors closed and it took off. This is not good. I needed that train to make it to the CEO's funeral on time. Now I'd be late. "I'm so sorry. It's my fault you missed the train." Seeing my distress, she kept apologizing, but I didn't want to make the two of them feel bad. "It's okay, things will work out," I said, trying to reassure her with a smile. While waiting for the next train, I called my boss, but there was no answer. Mixed feelings of relief and anxiety welled up. Once the daughter was back in the wheelchair, we sat on a bench, and I decided to ask a question that had been on my mind. "Do you two live around here?" "We actually just moved here after getting married, but there have been some complications." She hesitated to continue, so I quickly said, "Oh, it's okay. You don't have to talk about it. Sorry for asking." Time ticked away. The next train was in 15 minutes. I sighed, thinking about how my boss would scold me. The thought of being scolded by that boss again made me stressed. As well as being late to the CEO's funeral, just the thought of seeing my boss after so long depresses me. "Do you have any other worries aside from being late?" I was taken aback by her remark. I wouldn't usually open up, but I was at ease and began to share little by little. "I'm sorry for sighing like that. The thing is, I faced some unfair situations at work and was transferred to a branch in the suburbs. I initially had a stable job at the headquarters. That's really sad to hear. It might be strange to say this to someone I've just met, but my boss pinned his mistakes on me, and that's why I'm in this current state. I'll have to see him again soon, and that's been weighing on me. Haha, I'm sorry for sharing all this, but no one ever listened to me before." "No, it's okay. You helped us out. The least we can do is listen." She smiled warmly. "It's a bit embarrassing. I've never shared my work complaints with anyone before. Before I knew it, I was sharing what I had been holding in for so long. I probably wanted someone to listen." Words came pouring out, much to my own surprise. I guess my boss didn't like me, so he falsely accused me of making errors and intentionally got me transferred to a suburban branch right when things were looking up for me at the headquarters. "That's unfortunate. I'm sorry I can't help, but thank you for sharing," she whispered sadly. Just think of it as a regular murmur of an employee. Just talking about it feels like a weight has been lifted. I regretted burdening her with my problems. Wanting to lighten the mood, I changed the topic. "I actually have a dream. I want to produce frozen foods for foreigners living in the US, something authentic that reminds them of their homeland. But I can't do that at the branch I'm currently at. Only the headquarters handle food development. So, one day I want to go back and make that dream come true." "That sounds wonderful. I'll root for you." As we were chatting, the train arrived. I helped them board and we all managed to get on. Coincidentally, We got off at the same station 2 stops later. Thank you for listening. I'm in a rush now, so I'll be on my way. As I rushed towards the exit, I heard, "Thank you, goodbye." They, still getting a grasp of English, waved and thanked me. When I finally arrived at the funeral venue, the ceremony was almost over. As the priest was conducting the prayers, I noticed my boss glaring at me. Oh boy, it's all over. The thought of what's next gives me a headache. I shakily paid my respects and took my seat. After the ceremony, as the casket was being loaded into the hearse, my boss called out, "Hey, I need a word with you." "Yes, sir." The moment we entered a private room, he started yelling. "What do you think you're doing? Showing up late to the CEO's funeral?" "I'm sorry. I was helping a foreign family at the station and lost track of time." My weak attempt at explaining only fueled his rage. "Helping people, and foreigners at that, you should have just ignored them." His shouting was so loud that it seemed to have caught the attention of the others. The vice president and other employees also rushed over. "What's the problem? He was late to the funeral, and I was punishing him." "I see. Being late isn't good. So why were you late?" "He claims he was helping foreigners. I told him he should have just left them be." At that point, a young man stepped forward. "Wait a minute, what's this about helping foreigners?" The boss looked annoyed. "Who are you, may I ask?" "I'm the son of the CEO, whose funeral was held today. I haven't been in the US for a while, so many of you might not know me, but I'm taking over the company now." Everyone looked shocked. "I overheard your conversation. You're berating him for helping foreigners. I don't think that's right." "Well, I didn't mean it like that. I was just pointing out his tardiness." The boss was in a panic. "I can't blame him. After all, my wife is the Vietnamese woman he helped out." With that, the soon-to-be CEO brought out the Vietnamese woman I had just met at the train station. It was unexpected for her to show up, but the real shocker was that they were married. "Our daughter uses a wheelchair due to her leg condition. When they tried to take the train today, they couldn't figure out how to buy tickets. They tried asking a station attendant, but because of the language barrier, they couldn't get their point across. Luckily, he, who speaks Vietnamese, stepped in to help them. Not only did he help buy the tickets, but he also helped carry the wheelchair up long stairs. Despite being in a hurry, he stayed with them until they were on the train. My wife, daughter, and I are all deeply grateful to him. Scolding him is unthinkable." The boss was trembling. I had no idea. I'm so sorry." But the future CEO was livid. "That's not all. You've made some pretty derogatory remarks about foreigners, haven't you? Our company plans to produce more and more products for an international audience. It's problematic to have someone with your mindset. Maybe you don't belong here. Please, don't say that." But his pleas were in vain. "I heard you even resorted to foul play to get him transferred out. You don't need to come into the office anymore." I can't believe this." The boss had just been fired on the spot. The new CEO gave him a cold glance. On the other hand, he had warm words for me. "Thank you for helping my wife and daughter. I intended to drive them here myself, but things came up and they had to take the train. I know about the transfer too. Such things shouldn't happen. Once I become CEO, this company will operate based on merit, not biases." He was passionate in his speech. "I heard you speak Vietnamese. Would you consider working at our headquarters on product development for our international line?" I was surprised. "Really? You're sure about that?" "Absolutely. We need someone with your skills on the team." A dream I'd given up on was about to come true. Overwhelmed with joy and surprise, I found tears streaming down my face. Under the new CEO's leadership, I returned to the headquarters and got to work on developing products for an international audience. Like a genuine bibimbap for Koreans, a hot pot set for the Chinese, and an extra-large spring roll for Vietnamese. There were challenges initially, but with teamwork and determination, we successfully launched these products. When we released them, they became instant hits, and our sales skyrocketed. Our company's sales are on the rise. Well, I'm glad I trusted you with this. The CEO was very pleased. From these accomplishments, I was promoted. I grew close to his wife and daughter after that incident, often dining together. During one of these outings, I met one of his wife's friends, whom I later married. She was Vietnamese, so it became an international marriage. Looking back, it's such a mysterious twist of fate. I'm so glad I took that leap of action that day. Holding my child, I reflect on those moments. I have to keep working hard to ensure happiness for my wife and child, and continue my commitment to product development. You'll be the future CEO, the CEO once joked during a company gathering. I knew he was joking, but those words mean a lot. And I wonder if there's some truth to it, since no one else has been told that. It's a secret source of motivation for me. I'm determined to continue making products for him and for this company. And that's what I intend to do.